Hi, I'm Cavell Hilton, your science educator extraordinaire. Welcome to STEM Builders JM. If you're joining us for the first time, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you're returning, welcome back. Now, today I have a special treat for you. Today, we take a closer look at cells. Yes, cells, we all have them, trillions of them to be exact. And today, we take a closer look analyzing those plant and animal cells, looking at their structure, as well as looking at those critical past paper questions that you need to know the answers to in order to pass your exam. So let's begin. We will be looking at the cell theory, prokaryotes versus eukaryotes, cell organelles, plant cells versus animal cells, and of course, those past paper questions, as well as some mistakes and misconceptions to avoid. And before I begin, I want to lead with never give up. So according to the cell theory, the cell is the smallest or the basic unit of life, right? All organisms are composed of either one or more cells. So an organism is either unicellular, which means having only one cell, or multicellular, meaning having more than one cell. Human beings, for example, I mentioned earlier that we have trillions of cells. So that means that we are multicellular. New cells also arise from previously existing cells. So cells can't just appear out of thin air. They have to come from a previously existing cell. Prokaryotes. So they were actually the first cells. And pro actually means before. I always say prokaryote, that means before the nucleus. And so that's something that you will learn about prokaryotes. They're the simplest type of cell. They were thought to be the first type of cells that ever existed. They contain circular chromosome. They lack a nucleus. So as I said before, their name literally means before the nucleus existed. So they don't have one. They lack a nucleus and they have no membrane-bound organelles. Of course, bacteria is a prokaryote. Some more information about prokaryotes. They have a nucleoid region. And what that means is the area that contains their genetic material, which is usually DNA. So sometimes that is in the center of the cell. They will also have a cell membrane, a cell wall, and a slimy or sticky capsule. So they are actually surrounded by three structures: the slimy or sticky capsule, the cell wall, and then the cell membrane. See why they're hard to kill? So they contain ribosomes in their cytoplasm, and this is what they use to make proteins. However, they have no membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotes, on the other hand, came after the prokaryotes. And so they actually have a nucleus and a membrane-bound organelles. It's like everything that the prokaryotes did not have, yeah, eukaryotes have it. So eukaryotes are more complex. Remember before we said prokaryotes were simple. So they're the opposite of prokaryotes. So eukaryotes are more complex. They have a nucleus. They have membrane-bound organelles, right? And they pretty much include every cell that exists except for bacteria. So they include protists, fungi, plants, and animals, everything else except bacteria and viruses. And of course, some persons will also say viruses are not actual cells, like they're acellular, but we'll get into that when we look at microbes. All right, so eukaryotic cell contain three basic cell structures: nucleus, cell membrane, and cytoplasm with organelles. And if you remember these three basic structures, I guarantee you it will be extremely useful when you have to answer those questions about the differences between a plant, animal cell, or the differences between a prokaryote and a eukaryote. Just remember the three basic things. So if it's a eukaryotic cell, it has to have these three things. a nucleus, cell membrane, and the cytoplasm with organelles, membrane-bound organelles. What are organelles? So we've been talking about these organelles. You know, they're like literally little organs. I think that's what it actually means. So they're very small. They're even microscopic. You have to use a microscope to see most of them. The light microscope, you may be able to see the larger ones like a nucleus, a cell membrane, but you may even have to use an electron microscope to see the others because they're very small, right? Now, they are actually what makes the cell able to carry out its function. So they keep the cell running. So they perform various functions for the cell, and they're all found suspended in the cytoplasm. So they may or may not be membrane bound. And this is an example of what to look for, how to compare prokaryotes with eukaryotes. So here, the prokaryotes, as you can see, no nucleus, no membrane bound organelles, all of them are single cell because it's bacterial. Eukaryotes, there is a nucleus, organelles are there, multi or single cells, so it can either be unicellular or multicellular. And these are the things that they both have in common. So they both have DNA, which is genetic material. All cells have some genetic material, whether it's DNA or RNA. They have cell membrane, both of them have that. They have ribosomes, yep, and they both have cytoplasm. If we were to compare the prokaryote with, say, a plant cell, then you would say they both also have a cell wall. And let's look at this now. Two main types of eukaryotic cells that we will definitely be focusing on, animal cell and plant cell. So this is a typical animal cell. The shape, no definite shape or more rounded. Look at the nucleus being the largest structure within the cell. The largest organelle in the cell is the nucleus. Then you have the mitochondria. You have ribosomes, small vacuoles, and of course the cytoplasm. Now we'll take a look here at the plant cell. It has two layers. The first layer is the cell wall. The second layer is the cell membrane. The vacuole, that large central fluid-filled space, is actually the largest structure in the plant cell. The nucleus is actually more found towards the side. It's not in the center. And then if you take a closer look, in addition to the mitochondria, it have all of these green structures, which are called chloroplasts, right? So this is what helps to distinguish it from the animal cell. Cell wall, chloroplast, and the large central vacuole. Now, these are some organelles, and I've listed here some of the main ones that you would need to focus on for your exam. I've also listed their structure and function. And I will tell you, if you never hear this before, or if you never ever hear it again, please remember that when you are doing biology, human and social biology, straight biology, when you are doing biology, every single thing that you look at, you must know the structure and the function. Many times we tend to focus on the function and we ignore the structure. And so when questions arise that ask about, you know, what is the structure of this, we tend to provide the function, which is what we're more comfortable with. But you must understand that something must have a structure, it must have certain characteristics, and it is actually those characteristics that help it to carry out its function. So looking at the nucleus, it is surrounded by a double membrane. It contains DNA, which is a genetic material. And it is in fact this DNA and this genetic material that allows it to control all the cellular activities and be the center or the brain of the cell. The cell membrane is partially or selectively permeable. It controls what enters and what leaves the cell. The cell wall, this is made up of cellulose, it's fully permeable, and it is rigid. It's a rigid structure. It supports and protects the cell. See, so you can see the linkage. This structure allows it to be able to be a protector, you know, a support, a barrier. Mitochondria has, there are many of them in the muscle and liver cells. And in fact, their structure, which I may not get into for CSEC, that cristae, that membrane on the inside that increases surface area, all of those things allow it to be able to make energy. And so it is a site of aerobic respiration. The chloroplast contains a green pigment chlorophyll, and this traps the sunlight, makes food, the site of photosynthesis. You can say any one of these. Ribosome, they are found freely in the cytoplasm or attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. And their function is to make or synthesize protein. The vacuole, we mentioned that one before. It's a fluid-filled space in the cell, and its function is to temporarily store water. So it's like a storage sack or container for the cell. You have your pantry in your house, where you keep your food. That's the vacuole for the cells, right? So it stores water, food, enzymes, waste, etc. Now let's look at those important past paper questions. The first one being this one. You are to look at the structure and name each of the 4 structures labeled A, B, C, and D. So you're to name each of them, all right? What do you think is A? So let's look at A closely, all right? So it has some things attached to it, some little dots, yeah? There is some sort of network going on. So it's safe to say that this is actually the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And you want to make sure that you include that, the rough, in that description or labeling, because you don't want to just say it's endoplasmic reticulum. Remember, these structures on it are ribosomes, and that's what makes it rough, right? So it's a rough endoplasmic reticulum. Now we have this sausage-shaped structure with, looking like some membranes on the inside. This, of course, is the mitochondria. Followed by C, the largest structure in the animal cell, because I told you it's an animal cell, so you can't mistake it and call this a vacuole. It told you it's an animal cell, and of course, you did not see an additional layer around it. You did not see a cell wall around it, so yes, it's a typical animal cell. And this may come strange to you, but students will see this and still put vacuole. So please pay attention to the question. So this is the nucleus. And of course, it only has one layer, and that one layer of barrier that protects it and that controls what goes in and out of it, the security guard for the cell rather, is the cell membrane. Now let's look at some more past paper questions. This one states, name one type of cell which does not possess a nucleus. One type of cell that does not possess a nucleus. Any guesses? Okay, so the answer is prokaryotes. We said it earlier. Prokaryotes don't have any nucleus, right? Then name the compound which is found in the outer layer of plant cells, but not in animal cells. So this is the cell wall. So the cell wall is found in the outer layer of plant cells, but not in animal cells. And the next question states, state the function of the compound name in C1. So they're asking you, what is the function of the cell wall? So that is the question. And the answer is to protect and support the cell. Very simple, 1 mark. Now let's look at this question. Now this is a recall question. It's asking you to complete the table that looks at the components of plant and animal cells. Now they've actually given you an example. They filled out one for you. So the chloroplast, they said plant present, animal absent, and you're to use these words, similar, large, small, present, absent, to complete the table. So glycogen, so you can have glycogen grains, glycogen granules, and glycogen, of course, is a storage carbohydrate, but it is only found in animal cells. And it is the opposite of the starch grains that is found in the plant cells. So starch is also a storage carbohydrate, but it is found in plants, while glycogen is a storage carbohydrate that is found in animals. Cell wall, of course, you know, the cell wall is present in plant and absent in animal cells. The vacuole, what should we put for this? Present, present? No, we're going to say large and small because they gave us the words here. So we're going to use the most appropriate word choice, right? Now let's look at another question. Students in a class are discussing plant and animal cells. Brianna argues that the cell wall and cell membrane are different. To assist Brianna, you are asked to describe the structure and function of both the cell wall and the cell membrane. A very important question, a question that students end up losing a lot of marks on because, again, they focus on studying the function and they leave out the structure. So you're being asked about the structure and function of both the cell wall and the cell membrane. And this is a very common question. So let's look at the cell wall first. Remember, we said that it's a rigid barrier and it's made up of cellulose. You must be able to remember this part, made up of cellulose. We also know that it is fully permeable. Now, its function, as mentioned before, is to support and protect the cell. The cell membrane, on the other hand, is either partially, you can describe it as partially permeable or selectively permeable. So it has a partially or selectively permeable membrane. That is what it is. And I also mentioned that it is a lipid bilayer. When you did nutrients, or if you haven't done it as yet, you'll note that the fats are actually needed to form cell membranes. And that is because it is made up of a lipid bilayer. Now, its function is to control what enters and what leaves the cell. About a few more questions to go. So complete the following paragraph by writing the correct answer from the list provided at the end of the paragraph. So this is the list, and you're going to fill in the blanks, right? So some cells in the human body require more energy than others. Most, you have to look for the correct term here and place it here. So most dash require more energy, all right? So the best answer here is muscle cells. So remember I said it earlier when we talked about the mitochondria, we said that they are more numerous in the muscle and liver cells. So most muscle cells actually require more energy, and you can understand why. The muscles are the ones that are doing the work, the action, the movement, the work, all of that. So of course, they're going to require more energy. This energy is provided by we just said it, the mitochondria, right? Which are present in greater quantities in cells using a lot of energy. So cells that require a lot of energy will have to have a lot of mitochondria. Now let's look at two multiple choice questions that are, this I think came from the 2020 paper 1. So which of the following organelles in the cell allows substances to pass in and out of the cell? What do you think is a response for this? Allow substances to pass where? In and out of the cell. Now, which cell organelle we said is a security guard? That must be the cell membrane. So it's a cell membrane that controls what enters and what leaves the cell. It's a gatekeeper. It's a security at the gate, right, of the cell. So it is what allows substances in and out and controls what enters and what leaves. Next, we have which of the following cell structures traps energy from sunlight to help in the production of simple sugars? So trap sunlight, makes food, which is a simple sugar like glucose. Yeah, what could that be? Right? It talks about energy, but it is not the mitochondria. It is the chloroplast. So it traps energy from sunlight and it helps it to make food. So that would be the chloroplast. All right. One of the misconceptions to avoid is thinking that the cell membrane is alive while the cell wall is dead. Some other things to avoid: confusing the structure of the cell wall with the structure of the cell membrane, or confusing the functions of the two. They're usually compared in the exam, so you have to know the difference. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to our channel. To book a session with me, feel free to give me a call or WhatsApp at 846-4082. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at STEM Builders JN.